Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. We're back on the couch setting because, why not? It's a little bit more cozy vibes, and today I want to talk to you guys about something that's really been on my mind, which is the idea of creativity. And the reason I find this topic interesting to talk about is because I feel like there's like a misconception of what creativity is, and I just kind of want to talk about it a little bit. I want to start by talking about my own personal idea of what creativity was for most of my life and kind of how I see it now, starting as a really little kid. So growing up, I would classify my family as very creative people. We were all into drawing and painting and becoming very good at the arts. Both my parents went to school and did some art, and so that's kind of just been in our blood. I remember as a little kid waking up early in the morning and literally going to the table just to color. So it was just a big part of our life. And then arts and crafts was a big part of what my mom taught us, because she would do things from building piñatas for our birthdays, or our dad would help frost cakes to look super creative. It was just kind of built into what we did, just being an artsy family. And I started classifying that as this is what creativity is. Someone who can pick up a pencil or a paintbrush and succeed at it. And I remember one specific day where I drew a picture of a person and I went to show my dad, and he said, "That does not look like a realistic person," which was fine at first until my brother comes up right after me and shows him a picture of a person, and my dad loved it. And I said, "Why did you love his and not mine? His is not realistic either." And he said, "Well, his is obviously cartoonish." And I was like, "Well, mine's supposed to be cartoonish. How did you know mine was supposed to be realistic?" And I was a young kid, this could be interpreted so many different ways as a kid and as an adult, whatever his motive was, except it shut something down inside of me that wasn't really reawakened until the last couple years, unfortunately. So from that word alone, from my dad, I began to think that creativity was something I didn't possess, and I was in lack, if you will. So I ended up putting down the pencil, putting down the paintbrush, and deciding it wasn't worth trying to be good at something that someone else is better at anyway. So I stopped being artsy and I kept going with my life into other things. Flash forward, I'm moving to Florida, and I get a job where my sole purpose of this job is to establish a live stream system for them and create graphics for their to promote their events. So I went into it telling them I have no experience in this area, and they said, "That's fine. You can just learn. You're young and you know it more than us anyway, so just do your best." And so that's what I did. I went into it, and I remember being very, very nervous, and I had a moment with the Lord because I was panicking. I didn't know how to set up a live stream. I didn't know how to create any sort of graphics. And the Lord brought me to the scripture when Moses is in front of the burning bush. And he's talking to the Lord after the God's calling him to help lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And he said, "I can't do it. I'm not a good speaker." And the Lord tells him, he says, "I will teach you." And in the meantime, he sends Aaron to help him. And I just remember the Lord saying that to me. He's like, "I will teach you how to do this." And that's exactly what happened. I ended up making the graphics and making the live stream and going through the motions of serving this job that I had. And then eventually I moved on to another church, and I did the same thing for that church, their social media and their graphics. And at this church, I remember sitting down with my boss, and he was asking me if I had any creative ideas for the Instagram or for the graphics to promote certain events. And I remember being like, "No, you're gonna have to tell me what to do. I can do it, but you have to come up with the ideas." And he said, "What?" He goes, "When was the last time you had a creative idea? That's a good idea. Let me do this." And I said, "I don't know. It's been years. Can't remember a time actually that I've had that moment of inspiration and drive to be creative." And he was shocked. He was like, "You've been making all of these graphics off of empty?" And I was like, "I guess so." I didn't consider myself to be empty because this is all I ever knew. I thought this was all I had. And he was like, no. He said, that's not how it's supposed to be. So we went deeper. We started going into why I thought this way. And I brought up the story about my dad. And he brought up this analogy of how him and his wife view certain things like this. And he said, we see it as little Jonna, let's say 5 years old, got told this phrase, your art's not good, basically. And little Jonna's creativity got paused at 5 years old. And now at 25, we need to go back and unpause her so she can grow up too and become a creative. And in that moment, I was so shocked. No one had ever said something like that to me before, and really touched something inside of me. I definitely was crying and having a meltdown in a way, and having a hard time believing him, but also feeling like it made so much sense that like my creativity was kind of lackluster, not because I'm not creative, but simply because little Jonna got paused and never got to explore real creativity. And this kind of goes to what I believe personally about creativity, and that is, especially as believers, we should be some of the most creative, innovative people because of our Lord is creative. He literally created the entire universe, and every little thing is so perfectly thought through and stunning and creative that if we're made in his image, then of course we also should be creative. So when I had this revelation, if you will, I began asking the Lord to heal me and to show me and to teach me and to let me be creative for his glory. And so phase 2 of learning about creativity came when I went to another ministry that based their entire movement around the idea of catering to creatives. And I remember not wanting to go because there's such a stigma or like a stereotype of what creatives are supposed to look like and be like. And are you a creative or are you not? And to me personally, at this point in my walk now, I believe that everyone is technically a creative. And so it was hard to go to this ministry that seemed so cliquish. I understood their point. They were trying to reach like musicians and artists and dancers that a lot of the times get looked past in certain normal ministries. However, as someone who was struggling with being a creative, I went to this ministry and everyone was like, well, what do you do? And I didn't want to be asked that. I don't like putting my identity in something that I'm doing, for starters, but I was so struggling with not feeling creative that question was very triggering for me. And bless them, I think they are doing an amazing job with what they're called to do, but for me in my walk, it was very difficult to go to something like that, and it brought up a lot of more questions to me. Another one being like, what is a creative? What gets classified as creativity? And something that personally I've come to decide on is that creativity is so many things. It's not just music, it's not just art, it's not just dancing, it's not just being a great drawer or a graphic designer or a photographer. That is creativity for sure, 100%. But creativity is also problem solving and also able to work with numbers and also able to interior design and to look at something and make it beautiful. So all these different things are creativity, and I believe every single person has a form of creativity, and we miss out on that when we think only arts, theater, music is creativity. And I would call myself not creative all the time. And someone said, why do you say that? You're so creative. You have a solution for everything. And I was like, oh, I have not even considered the fact that problem solving and figuring out a solution to something is a form of creativity. And I shouldn't shame myself because I can't draw well. And it was a big wake-up call for me because I had been shaming myself because I couldn't draw well and saying I couldn't be creative when in fact I was creative, but just in a way that was different than what I had classified creativity to be. So I've been like rewiring my brain to what creativity is and letting myself be free to express that in all kinds of forms. Along these lines also, I want to talk about kind of letting yourself have the freedom to be creative and experiment. So I feel like a lot of the times in churches and just in life in general, we tend to punish failure or experimentation that's not good. And that is absolutely the soul crusher and the destroyer of creativity. And because if you can't fail, how are you supposed to learn and grow and be creative? There's no freedom in that. Creativity is supposed to be freedom. And I just think there's a book I heard one time. I've not read it, but I think I heard it on the Skinny Confidential podcast. If anybody who listens to this knows what I'm talking about, please comment it, because it was really interesting. They were talking about how to bring back creativity into your life. And again, these are maybe more artsy creativity things, but it helps rewire your brain to start seeing the world in a new, fresh way, which is creativity. So one of the things this book had suggested to bring back creativity is let yourself try and make a color in the kitchen. For example, like, can you get a pot on the stove and try to make the color pink by putting in a bunch of different ingredients? And the point is, it's messy. There's no point. You're not going to eat it. You're not going to frame it. There's no point in it other than to be creative and have fun. And I think there's this thought process all the time with creativity that it always has to be making you money or something beautiful, and that's just not true. And I've been trying to rewire that part of my brain more currently. I painted with my sister and a friend recently, and it took everything in me to be like, this does not have to be good. It's just supposed to be fun. I can literally throw it away later if I want to. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece that I can sell or that I can post on my Instagram and say, look what I did. And that's okay. Last thing I want to talk about in the concept of creativity is where we're drawing inspiration from. So I think a lot of times when it comes to creativity, specifically in the arts form, we think, oh, let me go find inspiration. I'll go listen to some music. I'll go look at art. I'll go get inspired. And that's all well and good. But I think something that's really been interesting to me is what happens when we just let ourselves be free to, again, create without the expectation that it needs to be something for other people all the time. And it very well can be, but I think it really limits yourself from tapping into all that God's given you grace for and the creativity that's inside of you, that's unique to you. When you're always trying to stay on trend or try to stay relevant, you're really missing the world changer that you are inside of you. And so a great example of this is actually Joseph Haydn. He was an Austrian composer who ended up working for this family, and he lived out in the countryside and never was exposed to all the popular music and the classical music at the time. And he is thought of to be one of the well-known and most beloved composers, and actually was the mentor of Mozart. So he was isolated for most of his career from all the other composers and the trends of music happening at the time. And in his words, this is what he said about his isolation: it forced him to become original. And something about that has stuck with me. I learned about that quote and about him in music appreciation in my first year of college. And that quote stuck with me more than any other thing I've learned so far, probably, because the idea that we have to go find inspiration is actually a lie. And sometimes when we're filling our minds with other people's works and other people's thoughts and ideas about what you should or shouldn't do, you end up not becoming your most authentic self. And that is a loss for the world, because really who you are and what you have to bring is the most important thing, and is going to make the most change, not you copying somebody else. And so again, it's intimidating because you feel like, oh, that means I have to go be myself, but what if myself sucks? And it's like, well, that's okay too. You just do it, because you never know whose life you're going to be impacting. And who you are is going to change by you embracing the freedom of creativity. And so, kind of in conclusion, I just want to challenge you guys, go out there, be creative, have a good time. Go do the arts if you want to go do the arts. Go do the music if you want to go do the music. Go become a problem solver or a logistics master. Those are all creative things, and they're beautiful, and the world needs you to step into that. And don't be me. Don't spend 20 years of your life thinking you're not creative when in fact you are. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this kind of brief talk about creativity and what's happened in my life with how I view creativity. Maybe if you can relate with any of these thoughts about creativity being a certain form, leave a comment below or give it a thumbs up. And I will see you guys next week. Bye!